Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our September council meeting, the last one of the triennium, probably the last one for a number of us, willing or unwilling. But look, we've got a fairly full agenda today, so we'll move through that. Just as we start the meeting, I've got an apology from Hazel just for lateness. She's hoping to get in around about 10 o'clock. So one apology, as I say, for lateness. Can I have a mover and seconder to receive? Oh, hands going up all over the place. Roger and Susan, all those in favour? Contrary? Carried. Thank you for that. Are there any disclosures of members' interest? Yeah, Lou. Just the minors. Okay. Thanks, Lou. Okay, thanks, Roger. Yep, I've just got, we'll note those. Thank you very much. Item 3, are there any late items? Nope, thank you. Item 4, confirmation of the order of the meeting. Graham moved and Councillor St Pierre second. All those in favour? Contrary? Carried. And the councillors' updates on attendances, not electioneering meetings, please. Got enough of those going on. But are there any updates the councillors have? I'll just quickly go around the room. Andrew, was there anything? No. If you think of it, we'll come back. No. Cool. Roger?
Yes, last Thursday, Friday.
Mike.
Thank you. Last Thursday, Friday, attended the Resource Management Law Association conference in Rotorua. Really excellent. Some tremendous sessions, well worthwhile attending. And at the end of it, they had field studies. And the field study that I went on actually taught you how to use a shotgun and trap shoot. So if the legal solution doesn't work, it taught you about the second solution that was possible. And I must admit that my ears rang for 2 days afterwards. But excellent, well worth it. Anybody gets the chance to attend that, I would very strongly recommend it.
Thanks,
Good.
Roger. Marcus, Susan?
Yeah, just 3 sort of highlights together with a couple of other people. I think Claire was one of the other volunteers assisted in the hazardous waste collection day on the 4th of September in Cambridge. It was really well received, really well received. And I just wanted to acknowledge Sally Fraser's hard work in that space. She's a real gem. So I think there was a lot of appetite in the community for ongoing regular collection. So that was pretty cool. Had my last Timutu Community Board after 6 years. We had a discretionary funding round. I can't for the life of me remember how much we allocated, but it was a reasonable whack. Lou will probably be able to give those details. And together with you, Med, Jim and Gary, met with the Associate Minister, Kieran McNulty, and had discussed sort of a range of issues from SNAs through to Three Waters, obviously, and lack of diversity around our tables at times, and I thought they're quite productive discussions.
Yeah.
Who seemed pretty willing to take on board some of our criticisms. So yeah, that was it in a nutshell.
Just while you're on that visit, Susan, it was interesting. Yes, I think he was certainly listening, but the comment that he made that stuck with me was, you know, it's all very well to ask for these things, and expect the government to pay for it, but they don't want to keep putting up taxes. You know, they can't afford to invest anymore, and particularly with the indigenous biodiversity that we were talking about at the time. And but it's interesting that he didn't take any account of the fact that we had to put the rates up, and it's still coming out of the same people's pockets. You know, it was quite interesting. Oh, the government can't do it because we can't afford it. Well, what does he think we're doing? Gary, I don't know, because you were there at that meeting. Was there anything you wanted to add on?
Oh, no, Your Worship, just a plea for the government to work more closely with us as opposed to putting out a proposition and give us a month to respond.
Just adding to that, the thing that stuck in my mind was when the minister seemed to believe that there was a good working relationship between central and local government, and he noted that it didn't mean that they always had to agree with us. So I thought that was kind of poignant in the circumstances.
Thanks, Susan. Mike.
Look, I've said it before, but since it's a council meeting, just an official thank you to the council for the PD money that has been invested in councillors. I think that's a really good initiative. I went on the IID Directors Governance course in Wellington, which a few of us have gone on in different venues, and just absolute wealth of knowledge, the most professional, amazing course I've ever done. So just, again, really appreciate the opportunity and got a lot out of that. And the other thing is just a thank you to whoever organised that light show for the Queen on the Town Hall in Cambridge. That was superb. So, yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Lou?
Just our last Civil Defence Joint Committee meeting we had in the end of August. And following on from that, we also had that same resource management. So, and the thing that sat in my mind was listening to Simon Upton. His speech was actually, I think, a key point speech where he actually put forward some of the questions that he's going to ask of the administration. And to me, that was probably my highlight of the whole thing, because I think a lot of the patsy questions that we were asked earlier, particularly with the new 3-Act resource concern, is actually going to have to be considered at some time. We also had this week, or on Monday on the holiday, 2 events which me and Jim actually both attended. We had the Anglican Church where we had about 120 people there, and at our service there. And we also had at the Cenotaph in Cambridge last night at 5 o'clock. We had about 70, I think, 60 or 70, I think, from memory, in that order. Yeah, we had mostly veterans there, but that was good. So we commemorated both, for the passing of the Queen, and I thought that was excellent.
Thanks.
Yes, also attended the Resource Management Conference. We've got the link coming today to all the presentations, and I'll circulate it to everybody. But yes, if you can, spend 15 minutes listening to Simon Upton's speech. I think you'll find it really worthwhile. Also attended the memorial to the Queen at the Cambridge Town Hall yesterday afternoon. And just 2 other quick things. The celebration of 50 years of the New Zealand Chinese relationship at the Cambridge Town Hall that Jim and I attended was most interesting. And lastly, just a real big shout out to the Cambridge Police Station with their formal opening, to all the people involved, Power Architects in particular, but also just a really special relationship now between the Crown and iwi, and how that particular facility has been built. And I think it's just an outstanding. We look at the police station now; it's in a great location, but it's the way that architecturally it stands out in Cambridge is just superb. Yeah, really, really proud of that for Cambridge. Thanks.
Yeah, I was also fortunate to be able to attend the Resource Management Law Association conference, and just echo what everyone else has said. Really amazing, learnt so much. I'm really hoping that Roger won't need to use those new skills at future council meetings.
No.
Yeah, I went to the Future of Wood, which was fascinating at Scion, and just what they're working on there. And did have the chance to talk to someone from the Climate Change Commission about waste to energy. Yeah, and they actually have advisors on that subject, and they'd be happy to engage with us if we did want to explore that further. I attended the hazardous waste collection in Cambridge. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, really worthwhile and great to see the community behind it. Really enjoyable time. And we've had the first meeting for the Sainsbury Road Reserve Focus Group that's been led by Amanda Banks, and that was really positive actually, and looking forward to seeing how that develops further. We've started off with lots of different groups, often conflicting needs or aspirations, but it looks like things are coming together well, and that we're going to have a great outcome. So I'm really rapt about that. At our latest Pirongi Award committee, we had that was held at Kaipeki Hall actually, because they'll be exiting that ward with the next election. But there was a presentation from about the Nahanapuri cycleway. So it was excellent. So there's a group there that are really keen to make the most of the natural features of one of the streams that leads through the village to the Waipa River, and combining it with a lot of history too, actually. So that was really well received by the committee. And lastly, I also attended the Queen's Memorial Service in Te Awamutu, and it was really moving, actually. And just picking up on what Councillor O'Regan said about diversity, so there was a comment there by the Vicar Julie Guest that the Queen did make a comment about diversity. She said that diversity stretches one's preconceptions. Yeah, so that was a takeaway from that service. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Claire. Quote for the week, month, maybe.
Thank you, Jim. I also attended the Kaipeki, the Brongy Ward one, which is just down the road from me, which I'm now out of my ward, but that's all right. I'll get over it. And now it was a very interesting meeting. You think these discretionary grants, we can whip through those quickly, but I think it was a couple of hours, wasn't it, or more just for our ward. So there was a good meeting, and she said Brian Marcroft, that will be historic. There's a Maori Pa, there's a lot of stuff coming up there, and the best part about it, all the landowners are right behind it. They'd like to start tomorrow, but we've got to work through the process. Claire and I also attended the Koramatua Hall AGM, and that's the most northerly meeting we can get. So that's always a pleasure to go to. Their hall's immaculate, and they run it well. And that's a couple of things.
Thanks, Bruce. Thank you. Listen, most of the events that I've attended have been covered off. Just a couple though. Certainly the skate park opening in Te Awamutu was a huge event on Saturday, and I don't know. There was a best estimate of about 500 there when at the opening, and I think it was pretty well used ever since. So, look, it's a really good. I suppose facility now, and if that's the standard that we're going to get for the next three, it's going to be pretty fantastic for the. I was going to say for the kids of the district, there were some pretty big kids on there. Some of them were starting to lose their hair, and I noticed a couple without front teeth as well. And I'm not surprised when you when you look at what they're doing. But look, I think that was. That's going to be a fantastic facility. So just hope that it's appreciated, and I don't think we'll ever get away from the vandalism, but I think the council can take a huge pat on the back, and a big shout out to the staff for organising the event, and certainly the designers were out there showing their tricks as well. So that was great to see. Another quick one, and we had this week of last week, citizenship ceremony back on, the first one after 13 months, which was really good to see everyone back, and that's always well appreciated by the community. And probably the most important one that hasn't been mentioned, that Gary and I attended the Tainui Ruakura Super Hub opening with the inland port. And look, that's a success for Tainui, but my takeout from that was a chance to speak to the Deputy Prime Minister, Grant Robertson, about the urban intensification, and tell him just what a challenge that was for Waipa and for townships, Te Awamutu, Kihikihi and Cambridge, and really stressed that it was running counter to the way we want to see our communities developed. His comment to me was that it wasn't the intent for the legislation to pick up rural communities like Te Awamutu and Cambridge, despite the fact that we'd made submissions and attended the select committee and had been completely ignored. But since then, I've written again to Megan Woods and Minister Parker about the issue, offering them a visit to Waipa to see how we're doing, that we are actually covering off medium density housing. Haven't had any other response other than a acknowledgement of the letters. So that's something that hopefully we'll carry on, and we'll be discussing it a bit later on this morning. But it just seemed to be a complete lack of understanding about communities outside of the main centres. So that's probably me. Okay. All right. Hey, thank you for that. There's plenty to get on with. So we're now on to item 6, the confirmation of the minutes of the 30th of August. Can I have a mover and seconder to receive those? Marcus and Lou. All those in favour? Contrary? Carried. So if we just, as usual, go through those pages, there's 10 pages, but if we quickly go through, if there's any issues, there corrections or comments as we go through. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, Claire.
It's on 5. Actually.
5? Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, just
that's
trying
all
to
right.
anticipate you. 11, the Te Awamutu Community Board Chairperson's report. So just in the second line, it says the Cambridge Community Board. So I think it should be altered.
Oh, thanks for that, Claire. Yep. Got that, Jenny? Yep. 6, 7, 8. Oh,
Just,
sorry.
yeah, that's right. So item 15, the memorandum of understanding about the climax. Yeah,
Yep.
just a wording thing again, the second line right at the end. So the trust regarding the future housing of a locomotive. That's what it is, isn't it? The storage or display, the future, there's a word missing. Yeah, future display, perhaps. Of.
Yep. Thanks, Claire. 8, 9, and 10. Okay. So with those 2 minor changes, typographical errors, a mover and second, the true and correct record, Mike and Claire. All those in favour? Contrary? Carried. Document sealed under delegation. Sorry, Gary. Is there any?
Thank you, Bishop. There's nothing of particular note in there other than the bylaws which you have adopted at meetings. And there's a renewal of a lease for a storage area for artefacts that the museum have stored offsite. Other than that, just warrants for staff.
Thanks, Gary. Can I move it and move Councillor O'Regan and second Councillor Gower? All those in favour? Contrary? Carried. Thank you for that. Item 9, review of, oh no, sorry, jump one. Delegations update. Diana.
Thank you,
Oh,
Bishop.
g'day,
So,
Diana.
Diana's here. So this relates to the bylaws that you've adopted, the interim election period and the appointment of commissioners.
Hand it over to you, Diana.
Thank you, Worship. Tēnā koutou. I'll take this delegations report as read, but as Gary highlighted, this seeks approval for delegations relating to new bylaws to be made and recently made, also to cover the interim election period, also certain RMA delegations and also relating to the Reserves Act. Very happy to take any questions on the report.
Any concerns? Oh, thanks, Lou.
Happy to move, Your Honour, that we accept the report.
That's all right.
Yeah,
That's
I
all
do.
right, Lou.
I'm used to the
Promotion.
Yeah, that'll do. Your Worship. Correction.
Between you and Councillor Gordon shooting people, we may as well have a court session. So it's moved Councillor Lou Brown and seconded Bruce. Sorry, yeah. All those in favour? Contrary? Carried. Thanks, Diana. Thank you for that.
Shows you where it comes from, doesn't it?
And now we're on to item 9, review of committee structure. Joe,
Don't need to-
Gary, he's going to introduce it. Sorry.
Yes, so at the end of every triennium, with the experience you've had under your belt with our committee structures, what we traditionally do is to have the council review how those structures have performed and make a recommendation to the incoming council. So that's the background for this report. Joe, over to you for some highlights.
Good morning. As Gary advised, that today it is to have a look at the committee structure and get your input in terms of recommendation to the incoming council. It is also to recommend that we do not discharge the district licensing committee. That's a statutory body and they may need to have a hearing at short notice, so that I want to retain that committee in the interim period. There's not too many changes that are proposed in the report in terms of your current committee structure. There are some changes to the purpose of the strategic planning and policy and service delivery committees, and also to the REG committee to expand the scope to include specifically emergency management. There's also a few changes in the REG committee in terms of updates to delegations in terms of legislation, and also looking at removing that chair of the service delivery committee having that ability to declare a state of a local emergency, because we've already got the mayor and the deputy mayor able to do that under statute. There are some committees in here that is proposed that further work be undertaken and report back. That includes Te Arawai, Mangatautari Reserve Committee and iwi Consultative Committee. It was thought with iwi Consultative Committee, it was would be beneficial to wait till the Māori Ward Councillor was on board and do a package of work once that was happened. The report also recommends retaining Te Kanahi. We had strong support from our partners such as Waikato, Tainui and Nita when those positions were put in place. Noting that for Te Kanahi, there will be a new appointment process which will start if the new council decides they want those representatives, then we can start a new appointment process with the hope that we would have new appointees in place for the start of February. Is there any questions?
Any questions, Claire?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I was wondering about climate change and the work that we're doing both in mitigation and adaptation. And there's no mention where that might fit. Has there been any consideration of that in the committee structure? You know, like some other councils actually have climate change committees, or yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah.
And that could be something, there's been no work done on it today, but certainly if that could be something that we note for consideration, if that's what you wanted.
Gary was just make a comment.
So the way it currently works at the moment is that policy in respect of climate change will go to the Strategic Planning and Policy Committee, where there are operational impacts, and you talked about the new Cambridge wastewater treatment plant the other day. Operationalising those things will go through usually the Service Delivery Committee. But we can make specific mention of those, you know, policy and operational issues in respect of climate change if you wish, but there'd been no thought given to establishing a purpose-made committee for climate change.
Yeah,
I think just in support of Claire, that it's so important at the moment that having it clearly identified, whichever committee it sits in, I think is really important. So it doesn't, well, I was going to say, so it doesn't get lost. I don't think it's going to get lost. I think it'll be to the forefront of a lot of discussions for obvious reasons. Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to support Claire's point here that it needs a specific identification of committee. There was a really interesting session at the RMLA conference on the whole new litigation industry that will be created from the climate change issues. So I think we should recognize that and put it as a specific interest of one of the particular committees. Yep.
Yeah, and that could well be in the Audit and Risk Committee, the litigation side of it. Yeah. So it's definitely going to be pervading through all of our business, I would suggest.
We could add to see a new bit after Maungatautari Reserve Committee, just to say climate change be specifically mentioned in the relevant committee purpose, and then that'll be flagged for the incoming council if that works for people.
Yeah. That certainly, it's good to flag it for the incoming council, but I think it needs quite a bit of thought given to it. Yeah. Sorry, Susan, and then we'll come to you, Lou.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Just on page, it's page 5 of your report, there's a suggestion there or a proposal that next term the quarterly district growth report, legislative reform and policy in the district growth and regulatory services areas reported to the regulatory committee as opposed to SPNP. I kind of I actually don't agree with that suggestion, because not all councillors are on the regulatory committee, and I guess I feel that I accept that the suggestion there is that information will still be made available to councillors, but I think it's really worthwhile having that reported to us in person, and we can actually not so much hold to account, but we can actually question what's going on. There's more interaction, and I guess we all know how much information we get sent to us by way of documentation. It's possible that could get lost and all of that. So I would propose that wouldn't be changed, because I think it's really valuable to have that face-to-face questioning or a discussion over those reports. I might be on my own in that space, but I just thought I'd flag that. I think it's really important.
Is there a general agreement around the table with regard to that? Claire?
Well, I was going to ask what was the thinking behind it, because I agree with Susan that it's really critical that all councillors are really across what's happening there. But what was the thinking behind why it would
don't know
change?
whether that Wayne Allen would like to answer that question.
I guess through your worship, I guess the thinking behind it is that the Strategic Planning and Policy Committee is getting bogged down with a whole lot of reports that are coming through, and this is probably the only one that doesn't come through to the committee from the group manager alignment. So most quarterly reports will go to their specific committees, and I do accept that not all the councillors are on the regulatory committee, and that's why I suggested that the report is made available to all the council. But what we're trying to do is give more work into the regulatory committee, because there's not a lot of substance going through, including the quarterly reports, both in terms of district growth and emergency management as well. I guess one way around it is we could report to both. I'm really keen to try and get this through to the regulatory committee, so there is at least having quarterly meetings and schedules. So that might be one way around it, that we report to both, if that's satisfactory. It is more work for the staff, but it is quite a widespread sort of report. It does cover a lot of policy work. And we have tried to pull it together to cover off all the national, regional and local matters associated with district growth. But it does seem to grow, that report, considerably, about all types of submissions that have been lodged by the council being attached to that report that are not directly associated with district growth. To Susan's suggestion, that might be one way of reporting to both committees, but I'm certainly keen to report through to the regulatory committee.
Claire and then Liz, sorry.
Yeah, well, based on the points you've made, Wayne, I wonder whether or not it could be split so that you reduce the reporting to all of the council, like to the SPNP, because I thought what you mentioned about those submissions, that those legislative changes and that probably isn't so critical for all councillors to be, really deeply involved in. It's more, I guess, what's happening in the growth cells, and whether or not it could be split out. So is that more sort of contextualised, just local stuff that's impacting in the space, number of resource consents and all that kind of thing, and any issues that are coming up, and then but all that sort of other stuff at a higher level maybe could just go to the regulatory committee? I do agree that the workload at the SPMP meetings actually is pretty high, and it's probably is sensible to see how it could be reduced. And I was thinking too about how we sort of worked through this issue with audit and risk. When that was set up, it's a smaller committee, and there was concern that people that weren't on it wouldn't really be able to keep up with what's happening. But generally, I thought that's worked pretty well, actually, as long as you know what's going to the committee and what's in depth in that. And then, like for audit and risk, we have that annual workshop where we assess risks, and all the councillors can come to that and stuff like that, which is probably the biggest, item that we deal with that's relevant for all the councillors.
Look, I actually want to support that. I think the regulatory committee and the certification required for its members, I think, really holds, some of those in-depth discussions that probably need to be held. I think those who've done a certification are qualified to kind of make, some of the, will have the really robust discussions around growth. So I support what you're saying, Wayne, support what you're saying, Claire, and perhaps, we can still send some information through to strategic SPMP just to ensure everyone is across that. But yeah, I would like to bolster up the regulatory committee. I think that there's lots of good experience around, and also I think it's a committee that hasn't met frequently. So this will be a good opportunity to kind of use those people more wisely in the future.
Everyone comfortable with those comments? Oh, Lou, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Say Your Worship this time. I just wanted to ask one or two questions, particularly with the regulatory committee again. I was in agreement totally with what you said, Susan. However, I just wanted to ask that this regulatory committee would therefore set up and elect our joint committee representative and operate all with our regulatory roles and civil defence roles. So that is quite an important, action to take. So this is quite a redirection, because if we did that as a whole council prior to this, so we're going down now to a regulatory role, and they would have to deal with the local commissioners when you had in a civil dimension. Is that correct?
Wayne?
Through Your Worship. My thinking is that the representative on the joint committee at group level is appointed by council, and that person is actually on the regulatory committee. So the joint committee representative is on the regulatory committee, also overseeing emergency management functions, because emergency management is under my area, and as I said earlier, direct alignment to the appropriate committee under the group manager. Those functions should be applied. So emergency management includes that, and to make it appropriate, that joint committee representative should be on that committee, as you are now, effectively.
Through your Worship, it's just simply that I had this thought that if somebody was elected from whole of council that is not actually able to sit on the regular committee because they weren't actually qualified in resource consent, would they still actually comply?
Through Your Worship, perhaps I'll deal with that issue if it arises. And then secondly, maybe they're there for emergency management purposes only when we report through on emergency management issues.
Thank you for the reply.
Yeah, thanks, Lou. Yeah, Graham.
Yeah, excuse me. I'm just a bit surprised that the new council will go and vote about retaining the Te Kanahai people on the committees. I always thought that we appointed them to our 4 standing committees until such time as the Maori ward was approved, which it now has in this vote, and then they would be not done away with, but they wouldn't be on the committees because they would have an official Maori representative. But that's not the case. And Tainui are quite keen for them to take it, and I kind of think it's, I mean, I won't be here, but it's a bit overkill, I think. That's all. I just raise it.
Yeah, Graham. Look, I know that is a point of view, but effectively having a good relationship with iwi is really important, and having the ability for their advice to be given on those committees, I think, is really important. And the new Maori ward representative, whoever they are, I think it's going to need some support, and it'll go both ways. The ward, Maori ward councillor supporting the Te Kanohi reps and the other way around as well. So look, I'm really comfortable with the recommendation, the way it sits. I appreciate your comments on that. But in terms of the appointment of those Te Kanohi reps, it was never subject to or limited to a time frame. If we have a Maori ward come in, then we will do away with that representation. So to my knowledge, that was never discussed. But yeah, of course.
I'd like to see the people, the Tainui people, whoever's going to come into the chamber, to actually talk to the elected members so that we, or the elected members, can get the background to their thinking, because we don't often hear that. We get staff that come in and say, we've been talking to iwi and we're doing a resolution or something on the agenda, and they are comfortable with our position, but we don't know the background. We don't get the real background to that decision. And I think if we got that, there'd be a hell of a good understanding about where they're coming from. We'd learn a lot as councillors. And I just think that we don't get enough of that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I see Claire nodding her head and think it might be a good idea, but that's all I raised. Yeah.
Yeah, Graham, I think you're probably right, and a good reason to keep the Te Kanohi reps on board for just that purpose. I saw some hands go up. Oh, Marcus, sorry.
Yeah, I support Graham's comments about that, because with the new Maori ward being elected, I'd like to know what the role of the Te Kanohi reps are. And also, I would just like to know, like, what the attendance levels have been at the meetings, because I find it's been a bit disappointing that we've elected them to those roles, but they haven't been present.
Yep, thanks, Marcus. That's something that we can work on. But in terms of the recommendation moving forward, to recommend as in the report to the incoming council, I don't detect that there's any major reason to change that in the report. Okay, just a question I've had, and I know I appreciate that we haven't had the Audit and Risk Committee meeting. It had to be put off until Friday. There has been some discussion at that meeting about making it a committee of the whole council. And it was really because it's a limited number, I suppose. It's about half the councillors on that committee, and it's not through any restriction or anything like that. But around the table, are the councillors still comfortable that it is a smaller committee, or would you think that it should be a committee of the whole council, as we've got with the others? Yes. Ken,
through your worship. Oh, sorry. Can I just, sorry.
Yeah.
Through your worship, I actually sat through the last Audit and Risk Committee meeting and actually enjoyed it. And there's information in there that there's information for all of us as councillors. We're talking about the risks that we're facing as a council. And I think that that's a vitally important issue. You know, we've got to be aware of what's going forward and what we're doing. And I think a whole of council has a good role to play in this area. As I say, we're dealing with very, very uncertain times, and there will be rapid changes, I'd say, within this period. So I do think that that has a very, very positive role.
Thanks, Lou. Ken, and then Roger, sorry.
So through your worship, I mean, you're quite correct. It is really, really unfortunate, obviously, that that Audit and Risk Committee had to be postponed. It's happening on Friday. There is a report going up to the Audit and Risk Committee asking them to make some specific recommendations to the incoming council. So that will merge into the report that actually comes from this item. The two streams will will merge. But look, the point that I would like to make, and in fact have made this every term, is that there is some really clear advice from the Office of the Auditor General in regard to the size of audit and risk committees. So generally in the commercial world, and actually elsewhere in the public sector outside of local government, the average size of an audit and risk committee, I believe, from recollection, is around about 4 people. So generally, best practice suggests that an audit and risk committee should be no more than 4 people. Within local government, they do tend to be bigger. So within local government in New Zealand, the average size is around 6. And in this last term, we did have a committee of 6. And then there is recommendations about either 1 or in fact, to be fair, two independents. We have always stuck with 1. I think that's a part of that is perhaps the skill set of the independent that we've had, which is quite an all-encompassing sort of sector type skill set. But look, in the report that so the agenda's out today for those of you who are on the Audit and Risk Committee, and others who are welcome to see it. Obviously, there will be a clear suggestion there that we keep the committee size at 6. But look, at the end of the day, that is that's basically something that the incoming council would need to consider.
So just before I go to you, Roger, so the Audit and Risk Committee is a recommending committee.
Yes.
So
yes.
Yes. So that's the important distinction, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and your worship, actually, that's a really good point to make. So look, very much a recommending committee. The terms of reference are very clear about that. That it is recommending through to council. And the other thing that we have talked about, and it has come out again in the survey, and again this report on Friday's agenda, is that there is a real need to have a far better communication channel between the Audit and Risk Committee and all of council. So probably the main mechanism for that. Well, in fact, there are some multiple mechanisms for that. There is the top risk discussion every year. So all councillors are invited to that. And I think that's been brilliant, and that's been really effective. We've always had really good engagement at that once a year. The other thing, of course, is the report through to council after every quarterly Audit and Risk Committee meeting. And I just wonder if we could kind of change that up a wee bit more, so that there is a lot more understanding and engagement, a lot more knowledge around the broader council table as to what is happening in Audit and Risk Committee. And of course, at any point, whether you're a member or not, you are more than welcome to turn up to an Audit and Risk Committee. It was wonderful to see you last time, Luke. Yeah.
Thanks, Ken. Roger, sorry. Yeah.
No, that's fine. I wish I'd actually left putting my hand up until I'd heard Ken with the limitation of membership in number. I was just going to add, being a member of the Audit and Risk, how much value I get from that, understanding the more personal aspects of operating councils that we actually do discuss at that committee. And that's really invaluable in understanding some of the intricacies of staff management that they're under. So yeah, I just want to say how much value I get out of that committee.
All right, so we'll deal with that at the meeting on Friday. Susan.
I just wanted to echo Roger's sentiments, and I recall we've had some really interesting sort of workshop presentations. The one that sticks in my mind was Earl White from Bancorp. That was really invaluable in terms of sort of scene setting around international and national economic challenges at the time. And I think that's probably, as Lou's probably foreshadowed, it's going to be more and more crucial across those sorts of things. So I think some of the information that was feeding into that Audit and Risk Committee, I think, could be really beneficial for the broader membership to get across.
Yes, so Your Worship, could I just respond to Councillor O'Regan? Look, I think that's a really good point. But actually, to be honest, I think that Earl White's session would far better have lived at the Finance and Corporate Committee rather than Audit and Risk Committee. And in fact, that could have been the very point you were making, perhaps. I actually think that would have been a far better fit, because you are quite right. The more governance is that sort of thing, the better. It's quite crucial to shaping up long-term plans, annual plans, etc.
The point being, I guess, that rather than a subset of us, all of us should be. I don't care whether it's finance or full council. I just think those sort of workshops and presentations are crucial, and will be more so going forward. Point well made, and Your Worship will certainly take account of that and make sure that we've got the right audience to those sorts of presentations. I understand that as only one example.
Okay. Andrew.
Very briefly, could I also add insurance to that?
Another good point. Cool.
Okay. So this is only a recommendation to the incoming council anyway, so they can change it. So there's no more questions or comments. Is somebody prepared to move the report in full? And Liz and Marcus, all those in favour? Contrary? Carried. Thank you for that. Item 10, strategic land agreement between Hamilton City and Waipa.
Thank you, Worship. So planning towns and cities requires.
Sorry.
It's just a right.
That's right. Morning, Hazel. Morning, Hazel. Welcome. You're looking really perky, so I'm glad you managed to make it. That's great. Okay, so Hazel, we're just on. We're on item 10, so we're just about to. Kirsty or Gary, were you going to make some comments first?
Just an introductory comment by me, Your Worship. So planning towns and cities requires lots of forethought and lots of capital investment, and so important that the city and indeed the area around the airport has certainty in terms of what the long-term planning arrangements will be, because these are very much long-term capital investments. So we've been working for some time through our future-proof partners in Hamilton City to look at what the long-term growth aspirations of the city is. And so we've come up with this strategic land agreement, and you've workshopped this twice. So effectively, this is about giving the city and the landowners certainty for the future. There are still quite a few hurdles to jump through before this land is freed up, particularly the Hamilton Urban Growth Strategy. But Kirsty, over to you to go through the highlights of the report.
Tēnā koutou katoa, through you, Your Worship. I'd like to request that the report be taken as read. As Gary mentioned, this matter has been workshopped previously with elected members. You've provided feedback, and the agreement that is presented for approval today does incorporate the revisions that have been fed back to Hamilton City Council by Waipa. So today we're seeking approval of the agreement, but also a delegation of authority to Gary as Chief Executive to finalise the provisions within the agreement. And by way of example, clause 24, which incorrectly refers to clause 33, would be corrected as a typo to clause 23, and the attestation clause, the execution clause, would be completed. There's also approval is sought for a delegation of authority for the Mayor and Chief Executive to sign the agreement prior to the end of the triennium. This agreement was presented to Hamilton City Council Strategic Growth Committee at the beginning of September and has been endorsed. I'm happy to respond to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirsty. Comments or questions anyone has? Liz?
Yeah, just a comment. So look, for me, this makes a lot of sense. It provides the necessary kind of planning for both councils and foresight, I guess, shown on both councils that, hey, things are changing and moving on a regular basis. So I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thanks, Liz. And seconded, Roger. Any other comments or questions? We've workshopped with Claire.
Yeah, I'm a little bit nervous about it because it affects the ward that I represent. Can I just get some clarity around when the land would move across to Hamilton and whether or not it would all go at once, so one big chunk, or will it be progressive? I think I've had an answer on it before, but it'd just be good to get that covered again. Thank you.
Through you, Your Worship. So you'll see by way of the attachment 1 to the agreement that there are 2 priority areas, priority area 1 and 2. So that first area would be the first area that would move across. We haven't got a fixed time frame, and as Gary referred to, there are processes that are required to be followed in respect of the Local Government Commission and Local Government Act processes.
So my question actually related to that priority area 1, if all of that priority area 1 would go across at one time, or if it would be progressive.
Kirsty?
So given the capital investment required to the city, by the city, in order to free those areas up, it's likely that priority 1 area would all transfer at the same time.
Yeah.
And just further clarification, so you'll recall from earlier discussion and through a workshop session, there was some discussion about the SL1 area through future proof, and that change has been made to that area depicted in the map and has been endorsed by Hamilton City Council. Thank you.
And I would imagine that it's going to be a higher hurdle for any city, not just Hamilton City, to expand into class 1, 2 or 3 soils with the changes that are coming about with the national policy statement as well. So proof that the land is actually required would be necessary before it actually transferred.
And just to add to that, the Southern Links is also going to be playing quite a major part with this as well. So we still await with anticipation from Waka Kotahi on the timing for that.
Okay, Marcus.
So we've agreed in Hampton City are looking at it. And what happens with the public consultation? Like if the public decide that we don't want it, or how does that work? What does the public consultation involve?
Through you, Worship. So this agreement sets out a process and I guess that prioritisation of areas of land, but there are still processes that we are required to follow in terms of the Local Government Commission and Local Government Act processes. We've said that assessing against the significance and engagement policy itself, that this isn't a significant issue requiring engagement with our community on the basis that there are those processes to follow.
Okay. No further questions?
Make it a natural boundary between the town, and then they really can't go any further because of the peat. You can't build on that peat, so it makes sense to follow that. And a bit like the Cambridge Expressway, the industry's on that side and the residential's on this side. So to me, it's quite natural.
Okay, if there's no, you happy to move, Andrew? Moved, Andrew, seconded, Liz? Oh, sorry, we've already got them, have we? Sorry about that. We've doubled up. Okay, so if there's no other questions, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Contrary, carried. Thanks, Kirsty. Item 11, proposed plan change 26. Gary.
Your Worship, perhaps I'll introduce the item if you don't mind. I'll do it from here. There's 2 seats there, and I'll introduce Wendy Emling from Tommy White, and she's assisting us with assisting the council with the preparation of the plan change 26 and through the process of the plan change 26. Of course, the report right here. So just a quick introduction on this report. This is about plan change 26, the media university own requirements and additional funding. So that's what the report is all about. Where we got to with plan change 26. So just an update that of course we as council complied with the legislation to publicly notify the plan change, although understandably very reluctant. We notified all our residents in the district. We did a lot of questions, FAQs, and we did 3 webinars. The 1st of September. They went all very well. We responded to quite a number of questions to folk that attended those webinars. We have prepared a submission on plan change 26 for the submission proposal at the end of March. And there has been directions from the Commissioner. What I'd like to do is invite Wendy to perhaps just comment and give the council an update on the legal position in regard to processing this identification planning instrument, including our understanding of no option to withdraw the plan change. Perhaps if we can give a bit of an update on the plan change as it relates to where Christchurch City has found itself in how it relates to us, and also the risks to the council if we do not appropriately fund the processing of this plan change, which is essentially what this report is about. So perhaps I'll pass on to Wendy to just comment on those points and any other matters she knows to highlight and then
Welcome, Wendy. Thank you very much for coming. There's a hot topic. So look, we all listen with interest in your comments. Thank you.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. So out of the 14 councils required to notify an intensification planning instrument, 13 have now done so, with Waikato District Council notifying theirs just last Monday, 19th of September. However, you would have heard that Christchurch City Council resolved not to notify their plan change very recently. They decided instead to write to the minister. The letter they've written is on their website. In that letter, they've acknowledged the breach of statutory duty and requested that the minister decide not to intervene, but instead to work in partnership with them. They've asked the minister for a response by the 29th of September so that they can advise the council before the election period. So we can't, of course, speculate any more than Christchurch can in terms of what will happen in response to Christchurch's decision. However, the position for the other 13 councils, including Waipa, is that the plan changes, or in some cases variations, are already notified. They are in the course of the intensification streamlined planning process. So essentially, they are in the hands of the independent hearing panels who will hear the submissions and make recommendations to councils. So council's role from this point is to essentially present its best evidence before the independent hearing panel in support of the qualifying matters that we've identified, particularly Te Ture Whaimana and the character clusters, but also in support of the other matters we've included in plan change, particularly financial contributions, because we want to make sure that it is the best plan change that we can achieve within the scope of the legislation.
Okay, some questions. Roger and then Susan.
Yeah, thank you. It sounds like a really difficult legal position that we're in, but may I ask, Worship, you took the opportunity to meet with the Deputy Prime Minister on this issue. What position are we then in? Is he also under that legal obligation that we've actually notified this plan change? So even if they considered whether or not Waipa district, particularly our towns of Cambridge, Te Awamutu and Key, were actually not included as tier 1, would there be any opportunity for that position to be reversed?
Wendy may wish to comment on that, but my understanding would be it would require a change of legislation.
Yes, there's 2 reasons why it is still worthwhile continuing to liaise with the relevant ministers. One is, as you've noted, they could change the legislation so that it didn't apply to particular councils. It might be difficult to do that given the point in the process they're already at, but it's always a possibility. The other is that this is a somewhat unique plan change in that the hearing panel will make a recommendation to council, but if council doesn't accept that recommendation, it can submit an alternative to the minister. So it will be the Minister for the Environment that makes the ultimate decision. So certainly your ongoing liaison with the minister is going to be worthwhile.
So it's still possible for us as a council then to not accept that recommendation. And what position does that then put us in? Are we in breach of the legislation if we did that?
No, that's part of the intensification streamlined planning process. So the independent hearing panel will hear submissions, including evidence from council. They will make recommendations rather than decisions. So their recommendations will come back to council. Council can either accept those. If they do accept them, then they will be notified immediately and they'll become operative. But if they don't accept them, they can present an alternative and the Minister for the Environment will make the decision. So it's different to a standard plan change process and does mean it does bring in that political element potentially at the end.
Susan, and then Liz.
Thank you, Wendy. So I'm just trying to understand, in light of Christchurch's move, what are sort of our options? I appreciate you've said here that the best position for us is that it's already in the hands of the independent hearings panel. Am I right in concluding from what you've said that it is not possible to withdraw that plan from notification? Because I had understood that that was still an option, albeit probably not a favoured one. I understand the subtext here, but is it still an option?
No, it isn't an option. The legislation prevents the withdrawal of an intensification planning instrument.
Okay. So really we have no options right now other than to proceed with the course that we're currently on.
That's essentially right. The plan change is already out of the council's hands.
Okay.
Your decision is the extent to which you now resource that plan change and support it, because one, there will be opposition by submissions. We know that in particular Kainga is opposing the use of heritage and character buildings as qualifying matters. So it will be important for the council to put forward evidence in support of all of our qualifying matters, because the risk of not doing so is that you will end up with the medium density of residential standards throughout the residential zones without the use of those qualifying matters.
Okay, so I think it's kind of important for all elected members to understand that there is essentially no option to withdraw.
That's right.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Luke.
I think you've partly answered the question, but my question was that this hearing would actually take the qualifying matters and adjudicate on whether they are acceptable or not. So they would be adjudicating whether Kainga presentation or submissions and ours, and give weight to each one. So I think that's very critical. The second thing I'm asking is, what is the timeframes on this? We're looking forward here, I know, and extrapolating, but we have a hearing process. What are the timeframes, and what do you expect for this, how long to take to get through this whole process?
The only fixed part of the time frame is that we have to have notified decisions by the 31st of March 2024. That's the direction from the minister. However, our independent hearing panel has issued some directions already, and we're looking at having a first stage strategic opening hearing in February next year, 2023. And the likelihood is the substantive hearing on submissions for Waipa will be late April. That's the latest information. So the likelihood is we would be looking at recommendations in the later half of next year with a view to completion by that March deadline.
Thank you very much. That gives us a little bit of an ideology of what's going on, what we're looking for in the perspective, because we could see a situation where the minister might actually change in that period of time.
Any other questions? Really, just in terms of the independent hearings panel, they can only consider those qualifying matters. Is that correct? There are some parts of the legislation that are actually set in concrete, and it's not open to them to consider as part of their discretionary recommendations, I suppose.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
The independent hearing panel will essentially have the same limitations that council has had in drafting the plan change. So the medium density residential standards, which is a set of both density and bulk and location requirements, are set in the legislation, and they can only be modified to the extent necessary to accommodate a qualifying matter. So that's where the hearing will essentially focus.
Yeah, okay. Between a rock and a hard place on this one. But I suppose from my perspective, it's just necessary for us to continue to lobby and work with central government and just try and convince them that this is not appropriate whole-scale change for Waipa, particularly obviously the three urban centres that have been named in the legislation. So there's, other than that, it's down to money, and it's a case of loan funding, Gary. And
so, Your Worship, there is another matter, and that relates to plan funding for Plan Change 23. And you'll recall that we discussed that in the context of the tranche 1 funding for the 3 waters changes. And so the recommendation when we considered that matter was that we consider funding that via loan in the same manner that we fund any other plan change. So there are 2 plan changes, and the decision we're asking you to make today is to make money available via loan funding for both of those plan changes.
Yeah. So the next item on the agenda is the Kainga plan change.
So yeah, that's an update on that plan change. This is about the funding for plan changes 26 and 23.
So round figures, about $500,000 for the plan change 26, and a significant amount for the plan change 23. Yes, Roger.
It's just another case of the imposition of increased costs, which ultimately get passed on to the ratepayer by this central government requirement. And I think at some stage this has got to stop, because not only the costs, but the time of deliberation, thinking and debating all of this, and time is cost as well. So I think at some stage this has got to stop. Sorry, I didn't have my.
It's all right.
Do you want me to repeat that all again?
Yep.
Just frustration at the imposition of central government costs.
We'll note Councillor Gordon's frustration.
You put me at the post, Roger. I was about to say the exact same thing, and it's kind of interesting, isn't it, that we've got a government that swore it would never introduce any more taxes, and it probably hasn't, but it's passed on costs unfunded, and it's coming out of the other pocket for our citizens. So I guess I accept that we're on a train and we have to soldier on, but a little bit like the Better Off funding, it sticks in your throat having to raise increased loans to cover the cost of work we don't really want to have to do. It sort of just feels really wrong. And the other thing, I guess, that jumped into my mind reading this is, obviously we've got a real problem in terms of staffing. It's a nationwide issue, and I guess off the back of that, I started thinking about the opportunity cost here. We're being derailed to focus our limited resources addressing a problem we don't really want to have addressed, and yet we've probably got work plans that are just being put on hold. So there's the opportunity cost there too, which I think is probably sometimes overlooked. So look, I'm quite I sort of resigned to the fact we're going to have to go down this path, but it doesn't go down nicely.
Yeah, that's a supplementary and probably directed at Gary. Gary, with all of the costs that are involved in this particular plan change, could you give me an estimation how much impact there would be on the annual rating bill in terms of a percentage point increase that's being forced upon ratepayers?
So yes, Your Worship, so as we're loan funding this, the combined total for the two plan changes will equate to 0.1% or $71,500. Now that's loan funded, so that, remember, that's ongoing for another 10 years.
Yeah. Definitely an impact of 0.1% increase in rates.
Well, effectively 1% all up because it's loan funded over 10 years.
Thank you.
All right. No further questions, comments? I think we're all on the same wavelength here. So we have the recommendations there, A through to C. Is someone prepared to move it? Lou? No?
I think I'll put my head above the parapet, Your Worship, because the simple fact that I feel that we are committed. We have notified the plan. We can't change it. We've got to go through the, fair enough, but I've got wood to barmer me. I just want it recorded that we are actually in a situation where we now, having notified it, we have to proceed. There's no legal option other than to do this. So I will hesitantly move the motion.
Comments. Okay. So have a mover and seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much. I abstain. Thank you very much. Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Wendy. Okay. Item 12. Gary.
So, Your Worship, this is an information only item. We're not asking you to make a call on it, but Tony's going to provide you with an update on the Papa Kainga plan change. That's plan change 23. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship and Chief Executive. So we do have James Fetu, I believe, online as well. He's our consultant who's preparing this plan change for us. And again, as picked up earlier, we don't have the staff capacity, so we have had to outsource this one. Also, James is an expert in his own right, being a qualified player and also of Mana Whenua Iwi, so a really good guy to help us out with this one. I'm not sure if he's online there. He's able to answer any questions around a stage 1 report that he's completed. But just by way of an update, we thought it was important to bring this back to you before you break for the elections, because we know it's important to you. We are progressing with it, and we've got Leah Newman over the back who's helping James as well. We're on track. James has prepared his first report, and with the funding that's been approved, we can now progress with this plan change. We don't have the time frame yet for doing it because there's quite a lot of Mana Whenua and iwi engagement that we need to pursue, and we need to work with them on what that looks like. So the next step from now will be to firm up a timeline, and in my head, probably the first half of next year, we might be looking at finalising the plan change. We just notify mid next year, perhaps. That's just off the top of my head. So just an update. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Tony. Questions, Lou?
Through you, Your Worship, but just too quickly, Tony, I'm very, very supportive of this. However, I'd like to make sure that we have some mechanism in place to stop this sort of development going into an urban area where they don't have that family connection or iwi connection, that a developer could actually inadvertently use this sort of legislation to create what I call a complex that could have negative effects in our community. So it's just something to make sure that we do have some guarantees here that we don't have that situation arising.
It's a really interesting point. I'm not sure if we can provide that guarantee, to be honest. I understand what you're saying. We just don't know yet what the shape of the final plan change will look like. So there are some initial thoughts on there that James has included in the report. It is possible that Papakainga might be enabled more within the urban areas. So it's not only about rural Papakainga. If that happens, then I'd be expecting there'd need to be some strong whakapapa link to the mana whenua iwi. So you wouldn't get a situation of a developer, this is what I think you're saying, trying to use the Papakainga provisions through a backdoor to enable more intensified development. But we do know that some of these developers might want to partner with iwi entities as well. So I don't know if we can provide a guarantee, but we'll certainly look at a kind of mechanism in the plan change to ensure that the outcome is right. Not sure if I've captured that, James, around the mana whenua link, if you wanted to comment on that.
Nā ka pai, e rau rangatira, tēnā koutou katoa. I guess just to extend from Tony's kōrero, at the moment, in listening in on the Ahuake spatial plan engagement with mana whenua, there's been some clear guidance from mana whenua around the importance of ancestral connection with whenua, and if that, in terms of a Papakainga development in urban spaces, mana whenua have already guided us in that Ahuake space, the importance of that ancestral connection. At the moment, the investigation hasn't identified any property in regarding whenua Māori land in urban environments, except for Porongia Township. Those are large lots, but other than that, there haven't really been any properties that's Māori land in urban spaces.
Thanks, James. Any other comments or questions around the table? It's pretty straightforward. This is one plan change that we really want to progress. So, yeah, Claire.
Well, yeah, I'm happy to move it. I'm really pleased to see this work being prioritised. I appreciate that there are complexities, yeah, but I'm sure that can be worked through, yeah. And we have had a really, yeah, firm guidance, yeah, from the area.
Thanks, Claire. So it's moved Councillor St Pierre, seconded Councillor Lou Brown. And just before I put the motion, I just, with the linking that back to the residential zone intensification discussion that we've just had, I think if we're going out making statements to anyone in the public, we just need to be careful that we don't say that the urban intensification plan change is costing us 1% on 0.1% on our rates. We need to separate it out. It'll probably be about half that, because the plan change 23 is also in there. So I just don't want to, if we're continuing to lobby central government, I don't want to be caught out exaggerating the cost. So just keep that in mind. So we've got a mover and seconder. All those in favour? Contrary? Carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, James. Thanks. Thanks, Tony. Break now. So on the program for today, there's a break now. So if we come back at say 25 to 11, if that suits everybody, 15-minute break.